welcome back to the Money Script Podcast. It's your host, Yohance Harrison. So happy to be with each and every one of our listeners and our viewers today. Yes, we are live on YouTube. I love it. Happy to be here with all of you. It's been a little while. I had some travel. I had to go to a wedding in Mexico. Yeah, I know, right? Tough life. I actually officiated that wedding. It was my first time doing that. So that was a lot of fun. So let me know if you need someone to officiate a wedding. I only do destination weddings, though, nothing domestic. But we're here on the Money Script Podcast, and we have so much that is going on in the financial worlds. And I have a wonderful guest today that's going to help us break down some of the things that are going on with some tax law changes. We're also going to talk about a few current events. In case this is your first time listening, I am a behavioral financial advisor, CEO of Money Script Wealth Management, where my role is to help individuals get alignment between their values, their goals, and their financial behaviors. We all have values. We all have goals. We also have financial behaviors that aren't always in alignment. So we want to bring those into alignment to help you get more of what you want and, of course, help you be able to grow your financial literacy. Now, I'm going to warn you right now, I am home alone, and I've got the little puppy down here. And when my wife and daughter comes home, she might get a little excited. So if we pause for a second, that's because the dog got too excited, had to be sent downstairs. But for those of you that have little furry animals at home, you know what I'm talking about. So let's kick it off. I want to introduce my guest, Dr. George Dandridge Jr., EA and PhD. And he is the founder and CEO of Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services. George, how are you today, sir?
I am absolutely awesome.
Now you're on the road right now. Are you international or are you domestic?
No, I'm actually in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for the Entrepreneur Festival. It's their 25th annual festival, but it's their first year doing a conference. And they asked me to come in and speak to artists that are performing artists as well as artists of different genres outside of show business to assist them with, getting things right before that wave of success comes, so we don't find situations kind of like, I don't know if you saw the story with Aretha Franklin's estate just settling and having a 7.4 million, I believe, tax bill, which really probably was twice what should have been allocated to that. But
yeah, it was avoidable. Let's just say it.
Yeah.
It was avoidable.
Okay.
It was avoidable. Let's just say it. It was avoidable. No, not only Aretha Franklin, we also had a Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman. His estate just settled a couple of weeks ago. The way the numbers worked out, I think the IRS got about 900,000. His wife got about 1 point something million, and his parents got 1 point something million. I'm like, why was the IRS in the state of California even in that equation? Okay.
Because planning is a second thought. And even for people that, have, for lack of better words, the forethought, for some reason, there's a failure to have a sense of urgency about it. And I'm sorry, I really, it may not be politically correct, but I really lack empathy for those that just know better and won't do better. To have the longevity, that type of longevity, I cannot believe or accept that along that journey, someone didn't say, hey, you need to do this or do this to protect yourself. I refuse to believe that.
So if you're on the journey right now, you're hearing it right now from Dr. Dandridge and myself. You have the resources. Stop and put a plan in place, because we don't know what we don't know. And you've all heard the saying, in failing to plan, then you can sure enough plan for failure. Okay, let's keep the IRS out of our business. Let's keep the states out of and probates out of our business. Let's put a plan in place. So we're jumping into current events already, and thank you for bringing that up. And I'm glad that you are down there doing that noble work in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We appreciate you, and I hope that some people take heed and do some planning, get some plans in place. Also this week, one of the headlines was about Chair Jerome Powell. He was testifying in front of the Senate, and they were asking him a lot of questions about inflation and interest rates. And for those who don't know, Mr. Powell is on the board that helps regulate what the Federal Reserve rate is. So interest rates and interest rates, those interest rates affect almost everything that we do, from homes that we purchase, cars that we buy, credit cards, student loans. The list goes on and on. So this is a very important job that he has, and what he's attempting to do, or the Federal Reserve is attempting to do, is to try to calm inflation. Okay, so inflation. If you've bought eggs recently, or lettuce, or a car or house or anything, you've noticed that things cost more today than they did a couple of years ago. And that's actually it's been for our generation, it's actually been a bit of what we like to call hyperinflation, because prices have been going up faster than they normally do. And that can be very devastating, especially to a family that's on a fixed income, especially for a family that's in the lower tax brackets, because they may not have a lot of choices. They can't say, well, I just won't get gas today, or I just won't eat today, or I can't afford that medicine anymore because the price of everything has just gone up. So what they're trying to do is to calm inflation. But he made a comment that is ruffling some feathers. And the comment he made was he's really hoping that employment will soften. Okay. So what does he mean? He wants to soften employment. What he's basically saying is that he needs for job growth to slow down, or to just go in the other direction, meaning unemployment has to go up. They believe that if unemployment goes up, it will slow down wage growth and slow down the inflation. And it is the Reserve's opinion that inflation is more harmful than a couple million people losing their job. Now, I know if you lose your job in your household, it could be absolutely devastating. Or imagine if you lost two jobs in a household, that can be devastating. But it's one of those things where it's what's good for the greater, or what is the greater good, as they say, the greater good is better off than the individuals that get hurt in that situation. So I share this with our listeners and our viewers, because I just want you to be aware of what is going on economically, so that you can start to make sure that you are recession proofing your own household, so that you are prepared. So if things don't go as planned, if you get offered a buyout or a pink slip or whatever it may be, that you have a backup plan, that you have some cash reserves, that you know where you can cut back or how you can go and make some extra money, just so you can keep the eggs on the table, the lights on, and things of that nature. So with that, and I just wanted to bring that up because it's something that's happening. There's announcements coming every day. I just before we hopped on, I saw an alert come across my phone that Facebook is planning to cut, I may get this wrong, I think they said another 13% of jobs. And Facebook is a large employer. It may have been 13% or 13,000. Let's just say there's a lot of people who are not going to be working for Facebook in the near future. Amazon just announced a lot of layoffs last week. So there's probably more of that coming in the near future as interest rates continue to go up. Now, it is tax season, so that's why I have Dr. Dandridge here. So I want to talk with him because he is an enrolled agent. So I first want to start with just helping the public understand what is an enrolled agent.
Glad you asked. So, an enrolled agent is licensed by the federal government. It is the highest awarded license by the federal government to represent taxpayers at every level of the federal government, including chief counsel, and being able to represent them in all tax matters, regardless of state, etc. Whether that is representing them in an audit or mitigating situations where people may have liens, levies, and things of that nature. Um, Unlike other professions that are able to represent in front of the IRS, enrolled agents specialize in taxation, and we're the authorities in taxation. Oftentimes, we're teaching newer IRS employees their manuals. So, in a nutshell, while we, kind of deal with accounting and bookkeepers and financial planners and other financial experts in their respective areas, where we specifically come in and fight for taxpayers or work in teams, financial teams, as I've worked with you in several situations, is basically putting plans in place to avoid taxpayers getting into those situations where you go to get gas and your card is declined because they've put a levy on your bank account, or are showing up at your door. And specifically, my niche roles are in business and cannabis. Because that's where there's not only the most opportunity for planning and savings and taxation, but that's also the area where people get in the most trouble, because what happens is oftentimes a business owner is a technician or a practitioner of whatever it is that they do. And that doesn't come with the education of business principles. And so a baker may be able to make a killer moist, cake, but his business operations in opening a bakery, the skill sets weren't so much there. And while in any business, no matter what, there's going to be some learning curves, some things that just occur. There are some basic business principles that just transcend across everything that you have to do. And so my passion is really working with business owners to teach those things and help them put those things in place so that they don't find themselves at the opposite end of an IRS shield.
Mm, well put, sir. And George was actually alluding to one of my favorite books. If you're not familiar, you're a business owner, I highly encourage you to pick this book up. It is called The E Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And he actually, the first chapter of the book, he talks about a woman that was amazing at making apple pies, and her friends convinced her to open a bakery. And she was really good at making apple pies, but not really good at running a bakery business. And as George said, we meet people like that all the time, that are really good at their craft, but don't understand the basics of running a business. I have a client I'm working with right now, over $200,000 in income in a business, and is still a sole proprietor, doesn't have an LLC, and has lots of risk associated with the business. Okay. Totally exposed. No tax strategies, nothing. But guess what? Really good at their craft, and will probably make hundreds, if not millions of dollars in the future, but don't understand some of those basic business principles. So if you are a business owner and you're starting to make a good amount of money, you may want to start to talk to some professionals about how you can put some basic business strategies, business principles in place to protect that business that you were building. So, George, I want to bring, I got some questions that I brought from clients about taxes. And I said, hey, I'm meeting with a tax specialist today for the podcast. What are your questions? So I got a few of them here. Now, some of these are going to may seem a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Black and white, easy to figure out, but still people have the question. So question number one is, if I give gifts to my church or to a nonprofit, do I need a receipt to claim it on my taxes?
Well, I'll answer that question in two parts. The first answer is I'm actually going to answer all of your questions with two words.
Okay.
It depends. That is the universal answer to all tax questions,
It is.
because
Mm-hmm.
no two situations are alike, even though the question may seem the same on the surface. There's so many underlying things that could happen individually that could make, and this is why I absolutely despise these, universal type of displays of advice that happens on social media and TikTok or whatever, because it's like, says who? Like, how does that apply to this person, this person? But to answer that specific question, we'll go with my number one rule, and that is documentation beats conversation. Understand that protection is the first thing you want to do. And so the IRS has the power to disallow any particular deduction that you cannot substantiate. So documentation beats conversation.
Mm, okay, good. Thank you very documentation. I gotta write that down. Documentation.
And let me add to that, and this may be Hurricane Katrina post distress or whatever, but the days of boxes and boxes of receipts and things of that nature, don't do it. Number
Mm,
one, the Internal Revenue Service employees, there are government employee, and if you ever dealt with any government employees, it's like they're not happy people in general. And so what you want to do is make sure these documents are not only in your possession, but that they're also protected. And so, what happens if your sprinkler system comes on and now all of those boxes get wet and receipts get faded? So, the best thing to do is to always scan these documents, keep them on a thumb drive, no bigger than this. Any type of emergency, you're able to grab that and run, and you're able to reestablish life if you had lost some essential original documents. You have copies of this on that. And I know that's off subject, but that's a big deal for me.
actually, it was that you got the next question. It's almost if I sent them to you ahead of time, and I did not. So the next question was, do I need to keep receipts for everything? And can I give my answer that I've given? So the answer I've given, it kind of goes along with your documentation. You need a record, not necessarily the receipt. Because these
Right,
days we do everything digitally. So if you
right.
purchase it on your debit card or your credit card or it was a Zelle or what have you, there is some sort of record because all those banks are required to keep records for like 7 years. So there's going to
However,
be a record somewhere. However, if you pay
however,
cash for that item, then that record may not exist.
and even on the digital side, understand that while banks may have a requirement to keep records for a certain number of years, that requirement does not include giving you access to those records for that same
Okay.
number of years. So
Interesting.
that is your responsibility to have those. Now, in the way of documentation, especially for business owners, I'm not sure if that question is from a business owner, but
It is.
especially for business owners, it requires more than a receipt. It requires more than a bank statement or a credit card statement, because substantiation in and of itself is not limited to a receipt. I've seen people lose legitimate deductions because the extent of what they had was a credit card bill. And while the credit card listed the date of the transaction and the amount and who it was paid to, it didn't say what it was. And
Mm,
so the extra documentation, what I teach in our B.O.S.S seminar, and B.O.S.S is the acronym for Business Operating Success Strategies. Uh, this is over 10 hours of pre-recorded business education content to help business owners really understand the fundamentals. You're not going to come away with it, being a financial advisor or enrolled agent, but at least when you are working with one, you have this understanding of these concepts. So everything is not just floating over your head, and you're able to really make data driven decisions. And that's what it's all about. And it's the same thing for the IRS. If you ever find yourself, in a situation where there's an audit and you cannot substantiate any particular deductions, the two, well, the three easy targets: meals, mileage, and travel. Those three are the easiest targets because they're usually higher for business owners, and they rarely have all of the supporting documentation with it. Some people keep a mileage log, but they don't say what this appointment was for, who it was with, where it was, so forth and so on. It can be uh, denied. Same thing with travel. Case in point, I'm here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Um, I have not only the flyer, with showing my speaking or whatever, but I attach the invoice to that, the hotel stay to that, the flight to that. And so if that ever comes under audit, every expense associated with this trip is attached right there with the income on a given date. That makes the agent's job easier. And when you start to make their job easier, you get favor. This is why I
Mm.
have a large percentage of win rates in audits because I take longer to prepare. The minute I take on a client for an audit, I immediately call the agent and ask for another 30 to 45 days because I'm going to go through that client's financials the same way the agent would, even harder, so that when we get there, whatever mindset they may be in, he could have caught his wife with the fireman that morning. I'm going to make his day great.
Not the fireman. Man, well, I hope there wasn't a fire. Or maybe there is going to be a fire. Oh, Lord, there's a fire. Thank you for that. That is very helpful. Business. Say the acronym BOSS. Business
Business
Operation
operations success strategies. And
Strategies. All
so,
right. And I'm sure you'll tell us how we can find that on your website a little bit later.
I didn't put that on there. It's actually on the standalone website. We're developing an entire tax academy, uh, ideally for tax professionals, but that was already on there. In fact, Yohance was one of the speakers at the very first B.O.S.S 2020 event. And so we took those same concepts, those same principles, kind of repurposed, repackaged, updated, did recordings for it, and released it as B.O.S.S 2022. Uh, and the reason being is because the logistics of doing the in-person event just was not feasible to continuously get that information out.
Especially in 2020. We were braving it through COVID and all that other fun stuff.
It was
So
the craziest thing. Like we did it on the last day of freedom.
the last day of freedom. The last day of
It
freedom.
was a
Like
leap
after
year.
that,
That was
that was
the
probably
2020.
the last large person event that I went to that wasn't on Zoom for 2 years. That was it.
Yeah, it was
So
on. It was a leap year. So on February 29th, it was the weirdest thing
yep,
because the
yep.
next day the world closed.
World closed. That was it. I was like, oh, glad I got outside yesterday. So all right. So we have one more. And this one, um, this one is has been coming up a lot. So there was a some rule changes that happened with the IRS last year regarding peer-to-peer payments, Zelle, Venmo, Cash App, etc. And so the rule said that okay, starting in 2022, you got to document all of this, and those entities will be sending 1099Ks, I believe. 1099K, is it 1099? One of them, but they're going to send a 1099 to recipients that receive more than $600. And now that rule implementation has been delayed. So the question that people have, and I don't think we know the answer yet, but the question is, how will I tell the IRS that, I'm just splitting rent with my sister, or that was, I just sold a couch. I mean, I mean, are they really going to be nitpicking, every single Zelle and Cash App transaction that we have?
We do have the answer.
Oh,
We have the answer. We have what they ideally want to do, and we also have the answer. The answer is that they currently and may not ever have the wherewithal to do that, but it does make you a target if you're operating that way. So the first thing that you have to understand is that if you are not a business owner and you simply use peer-to-peer payment platforms for their intended purposes, this won't concern you. Now, that's specifically related to primarily Cash App and PayPal. Because typically with Zelle, it it's typically a business type of account. Not always, but typically. And so those transactions are recorded. Now, you have some instances where people are running their businesses entirely off
mm-hmm.
of a Cash App or a PayPal platform. This is gonna make people uncomfortable what I'm about to say. So wrap yourself up tight because you're about to get some truth here. In fact, I have a business owner that I've been trying to do a transaction with for almost a month, and they don't have any other way besides, well, at one point they told me Zelle and Cash App. And so the one bank that I deal with, that I have those accounts with, they're literally just there for that. They're not, there's never money really there because it's kind of like when the kids are going to call, you know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
it's not money like really there. So it's like, okay, I got to wait till I can go to this bank to go put money in this bank or whatever the case may be. So in opening some new accounts with a new business that had Zelle, I reached out to them. I was like, hey, what's your Zelle? I can send that today. He says, oh, well, I can't get into my Zelle. I have Cash App. Well, once again, those banks don't have Cash App or whatever. So we're back to square one. I thought about, the fact that this is, even though it's only a $300 transaction that'll take place, I was like, imagine if he faces this with 50 people, you know, every quarter or so. That starts to get a significant amount of money, right? Well, that's where the IRS is, and this ties back into what you were saying earlier uh, with Chairman Powell. This is the challenge the world over, but especially in governments that uh, grow in taxation. Here's your challenge: you're applying or attempting to apply these old fundamentals that are
Hmm.
being outpaced by technology. Case in point, you mentioned, well, we want to send unemployment in another direction if you can't soften employment. Well, here's the reality: there are people our age that are locked down in their jobs, and if they, for some reason, lose their job or whatever, they're going to hurt until they find a new one. But our kids don't really have much of an interest in a job to begin with. It's not to say that they want to open a business per se, but technology has enabled so many means of income. And the
Mm-hmm.
IRS is realizing, hey, we cannot figure this out. We can't keep a cap on it. And some genius said, well, at the end of the day, they have to get paid. So let's do that. Just like the same way there's a move to the governments the world over are trying to develop their own digital coins or whatever, all for the same reason. They want to track the income to be able to tax the income. Well, what a lot of people don't know is there's been over the past 4 years now, 5 years, over the last 5 years, there have been an absolute waste of government resources auditing people and or sending out letters applying pressure to people for invalid tax returns that were actually 100% legitimate. And one thing that's really totally unfair is the government will go after Yohance before they go after MoneyScript.
Hmm.
And so you had people that were, say, working for Uber or some
Mm-hmm.
other ride share, or they were an independent contractor. Because I've even had positions in this situation where their contract was such that the 1099 issued showed the entire gross amount paid under their account. It did not account for the fees that that company took. It did not account for any of the other expenses. And this is what was reported to the IRS. So they acted in kind because, that's what was reported to them. But then what was given to that particular practitioner was a 1099 showing their net amount. And so it would
Mm-hmm.
cause all kind of confusion. And this is what's going to happen with this 1099K because you're going to get two forms essentially. Because you may get 1099s from your vendors, but then you're going to get a 1099K where they paid you with a credit card or whatever, and it's going to look like double income. So you have these 1099s that represented $100,000, but you have this 1099K that shows 400 transactions, for 90K because all of it wasn't paid on credit card. And now you have to defend that, which goes back to golden rule number one: documentation beats conversation. This is not the time to not have an accounting system in place, even if it's not a CPA or bookkeeper or what have you, even if you have to use Excel or sit down at the table at the end of the month with your bank statement, and attach whatever you have to do to be able to do it. What you don't want is to walk into an audit and not be able to substantiate what was legitimate business expenses and get double taxed.
Hmm. Preach. This is by Dr. Dandridge. He's got a prescription for all of us. He said documentation beats trying to have a conversation. So let's just start with having some documentation. Dr. Dandridge, we learned so much from you today. We appreciate you taking some time on the Money Script podcast. Please tell our friends and family if they are looking to work with you, how can they reach you?
You can reach me at elite8financial.com/appointments. I do have a free coffee on there if it's a quick question that you can schedule on there, or if you have an IRS letter, do not put it off, because if I have time, I want to add this.
Add it.
With every IRS letter you get is a methodology, order of steps they have to take. And each one, you just lost a little bit more rights, a little bit more rights, a little bit more rights. The more time you give me to defend you, the better the outcomes will be. Don't lose your right to go to tax court. Don't lose your right to appeals by sticking that off to the side, because that's not going to make it go away. You can reach me at 866-235-4838, 1-866-2-ELITE-8, or you can reach me at elite8financial.com.
All right. Make sure you tell him the Money Script podcast sent you so he can get me a cup of coffee or something like that. And really quick, I have to say, George is right. I learned the hard way. Okay. Listen to me, family. I learned the hard way. You don't have to do what I did. I ended up with over a 6-figure tax bill. I missed my court date. Okay. You do not, and this, I can go on to the reasons, the excuses that it happened. It's unimportant now. It's all taken care of, water under the bridge. But the biggest mistake I made that I learned when I started working with a professional was ignoring it. Okay. And I learned quickly that all I had to do was respond. If I just responded, they would have given me more time. Would have been that simple, because that's really all I needed. I just needed more time. I was waiting for a transaction to happen, and I just needed the time, but it took too long. Next thing, it was liens and levies, and I thought I was going to be hanging out with Wesley Snipes. It didn't get that bad. However, when you have over 6 figures, they are, hey, by the way, IRS agents carry guns. Okay. Did y'all know that? IRS agents are licensed to carry. It'll be right on their hip. Okay. These are government agents. You don't want to, I won't say the word. There might be children listening. Okay.
Dr. You mentioned guns. I have to give them this. You mentioned the guns and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So don't confuse revenue agents with revenue officers. These are two completely different people. And for the ones that carry guns, I need, if your listeners don't take anything else besides documentation beats conversation, they need to know this. If ever, an IRS agent shows up at your home or place of business and they are wearing a gun, you are in serious trouble. However, there's a card you can play, and I suggest you play it really, really quickly. You have rights as a taxpayer. You simply tell them, I would like to retain counsel, and you call me immediately. At that point, They have to fall back. Um, this is very, very important. Anything you say can and will
It will be
be used
used
against
against
you.
you
And
in that tax court law.
if you don't play that card before they play the cuffs, then it's too late. You have to go, and you can still tell them, but you have to call me from there. If you call me before that happens, I can immediately call the supervisor, stop this action right then at that moment. And you asked earlier about, well, what an enrolled agent does. That's one of the things that we are able to do is immediately step in your place, protect your rights, and make sure that you are treated fairly, because little nuance, the IRS isn't always right.
No, they're not. I've caught them in a couple of oopsies. And it's funny, you send it to them, they're like, oh, and they don't send an apology letter, nothing. They're just like,
My
oh, we
bad.
corrected it. They don't even say my bad. They say, oh, we corrected it. It's like, can I get an apology? You threatened to take everything I have on your mistake. And all I get is oh yeah, you're right. Here's the $250 we owe you. Actually, not here's the $250. We owe you $250. We'll give it to you when we get ready.
Wait, let me get it to you.
Dr. Dandridge, thank you so much for spending some time on the Money Script podcast. It is always fun to spend some time with you. Again, if you have questions, once you rewind it back a few seconds, he gave you his phone number, he gave you his website, he offers a free coffee, but he said if you have an IRS letter, do not delay. And I'm telling you from the heart, do not delay. It's not worth the pain. It's not worth the cost. It's not worth any of that. Sometimes all you need is a little more time. So that will wrap it up for the Money Script podcast today. I got 6 interviews on the calendar this month. So I'm gonna catch up with some of that lost time. Like I said, I was traveling. Again, I'm here to officiate your weddings if that's what you need, but destination only. And you got to pay for me and the wife. And no, we don't fly Spirit. So if you're interested in that, let me know. It's a new side hustle that I have. I'm kidding. I just did it for a friend, but I'm happy to be your friend too. Catch us next time on the Money Script podcast. Everyone take care and have a great rest of the tax season. Thanks for joining us on the Money Script podcast. Be sure to check out our other episodes, subscribe, follow, and give us 5 stars. Continue to send your financial questions on Twitter or Instagram at the Money Script. Go to moneyscriptwealth.com and schedule your complimentary consultation to discuss your specific goals and concerns. Financial advisory and investment management services are offered by Money Script Wealth Management PLLC, a registered investment advisory firm registered in the state of Texas and California and other states where exempt. The Money Script LLC and the Money Script Wealth Management PLLC and guests of the episode may have interest in the investments mentioned today. The opinions and views are expressed here are for informational purposes only. This material is educational in nature and should not be deemed as a solicitation for any specific product or service. All investments involve risk and a significant loss of principal. The Money Script nor Money Script Wealth Management offer tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney for specific advice about your situation. Until next time.